Let's go in depth now and get some more analysis. We'll bring in retired Marine Colonel Steve Ganyard, who is an ABC News contributor and former State Department official. Steve, again, thanks for taking the time with us tonight.
Thanks, Phil.
Let's take a step back to begin and ask why. The U.S. is getting out of Afghanistan, so what was the message ISIS-K was trying to send to America and to the world today, or was it just about killing as many Americans as they could?
Phil, I would guess that probably 99.9% of Americans had never heard of ISIS-K until today. So a small offshoot group of Al-Qaeda. So they're essentially Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. And they said, we're here and you're going to have to deal with us. And we are loyal to ISIS and to Al-Qaeda, and that we are going to pay the United States back in any way we can. But the more interesting thing is here's what's going on within the civil war that is Afghanistan. From what I'm hearing from people on the ground, this is being perceived as a fight between the Taliban and ISIS-K for recognition, for authority. And to do this, ISIS-K is saying, we're here and we're going to fight the Taliban for control of this country. So there's an interesting dynamic played out here. Shoot up Americans, kill Americans as a way to gain favor with the Afghan people. So it's a terrible game, but it's Afghanistan, and it is a civil war that we got into, and it's a civil war that we are leaving.
So the question is, was a terrorist attack like this inevitable? We heard the Biden administration saying this for days, that it was imminent. They told Americans to go home, to leave the gate. Is there anything the Biden administration or the military could have done to prevent this?
Phil, I think any American, you don't have to be a military expert to say this could have been done better. In some ways, the messiness of a withdrawal like this was inevitable, but it certainly could have been done better. One of the things that we couldn't count on was having the Afghan army outside doing these checks that the Marines were forced to do, these pat downs. And you saw it in Ian and Martha's tape there, how vulnerable those Marines were. I mean, they're just, anybody could have taken a shot at them, and they did. So it's just it's a very tough situation. And those Marines were in such a vulnerable position that something like this was in probably just inevitable.
Well, you heard the president speaking today, talking about completing the mission, saying, quote from him, "We will not forgive, we will not forget." My question to you is, what does that even mean at this point as we continue to withdraw our forces?
Yeah, that's a tough one, Phil. This is a very emotional time, and this is not a time to let emotion rule what needs to be done. So we have to go back, focus on getting the people out. And then the real problem is going to be, how do you get all American troops out without getting shot at? So you think about it, you have this perimeter around the airport, and when it's time to go and you have the last few airplanes and you have all of those military folks that need to jump on, what do? Do you put the airplane in the middle of the runway and everybody runs in from the edges, jumps on the airplane, takes off? I mean, this is not an easy situation. There's nobody there to take care of them. Of course, there will be air cover overhead covering how the U.S. works. But, what if civilians run across the airfield trying to jump on one of those airplanes? The end game on August 31st is going to be ugly, and it's just going to be a question of degree.
Well, you've been talking about how difficult the situation is there and how complex and complicated. There's been some diplomacy between the U.S. and the Taliban, as we know, daily. What kind of leverage does the U.S. have with them in this particular moment after what's happened? It does today's terrorist attack. How does today's terrorist attack change that relationship?
Boy, that's a good question, because we really don't have any leverage. And now the Taliban doesn't have any leverage, because if they were true to their word, which would be something new, they let or weren't their perimeter security allowed these terrorists to get through. Now it's Afghanistan, and corruption is a way of life. So maybe greasing the palm along the way got these terrorists through Taliban checkpoints. But it's also hundreds of thousands of people. It wouldn't have been hard to sneak through and for these terrorists to get up close to those Marines. So how the relationship evolves, that's a big question. But it's really in the Taliban's interest for the U.S. to be able to leave without further casualties. The Afghan economy is probably weeks away from collapse. The U.S. pumps so much money into that economy that the Taliban need international support. They need international lines of credit. They need for NGOs to come in and help prop the country up. So it is in their interest for the U.S. to leave without further casualties. Obviously, ISIS-K had other ideas because they don't care whether the U.S. leads and who comes into the country. They want to go back to the 7th century, cut off all internet and phones, and go back to some preconceived notion of what Islam ought to be. So very tough. And the next couple of days, who knows? But 5 days left. It's going to be no matter what, it's not going to be good.
Steve, finally tonight, ABC News getting reports of people trying to get out of the country over land. However they're trying to do that, how dangerous is that? What does that look like?
Phil, if you've ever been, anybody that's ever been to Afghanistan, it's a beautiful country. It is so rugged. It makes anything in the American West or in Europe look like small hills. That's good in the sense that the Taliban can't control all the borders and that people, if they can get to the borders, would have a chance to get out. But it's so rugged, and most of the roads that any of these people would have to travel over are going to be going through Taliban checkpoints. Maybe 5, maybe 10, and every one of those Taliban checkpoints is going to be asking for money. And the way things work in Afghanistan, if there's an ISIS person over here that says, I'll pay you $100 if you hand off this to any American citizens, that is probably going to happen. So there is a real danger here that we see U.S. citizens or people that have worked with the U.S. trying to get out of the country and being held hostage. And we don't want to go back to those days in Iraq and Syria where we were seeing on social media these gory executions. It is not going to be good if we see U.S. citizens being held hostage by ISIS-K or by Taliban who are trying to get out through the airport.
Now, it's a horrible thought to even contemplate. Retired Marine Colonel Steve Ganyard, thank you so much.
Thanks, Phil.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.